That is all for mark the perseverance. The second very important topic at hand is Israel-Palestine conflict. I have chosen this topic because there are 1,000 of videos and explanations and all, but I did not find any very comprehensive explanation of what actually is Israel-Palestine conflict and why and how should we study it from our exam point of view, and the what is the basis of this whole Israel-Palestine conflict. So I have tried to I have tried to develop this lecture or this series, this series of slides, to make it very comprehensively understandable. At the same time, we should be able to focus on the parts that are important from our exam point of view. Okay? The nature and cause of conflict. The issues at hand in this Israel-Palestine conflict are the nature and the cause of conflict, ancient origins of the conflict, several wars that have taken place, and what is the current status. Okay? So, and why is it in news? Because International Court of ICC, International Criminal Court, ruling has said that it has jurisdiction over the territories occupied by Israel after the 1967 Arab-Israel war. Okay? And those territories are Gaza Strip, and of course the areas that Israel has annexed from West Bank. ठीक है? अगर हम इजराइल और गाजा का अगर हम मैप देखें, okay, so this is Gaza Strip, okay, this is West Bank. The Gaza Strip and West Bank are Palestinian territories. They are Palestinian territories. This area that is colored is Israel. This upper part is Golan Heights. Golan Heights is the part from Syria. It was annexed by Israel. Although Syria shows Golan Heights in its own maps, but Golan Heights now lies under the control of Israel. And you can see this, oh sorry. So first of all, we need to geographically understand what is a point of conflict. Okay, then we can see the underlying cause of the conflict and how to resolve it. This is Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and to the south is Egypt. मतलब first of all, यहीं पे एक current prelims का question बनता है. What are the countries that surround Israel? And this has come time and again. This region, Middle East, is very important from the prelims point of view, in the sense that there are a lot of questions that might come into prelims exam based on the maps, because Asia Minor, Turkey, and there are some seas that are bounded by land, है ना, और इस वजह से ये एरिया मैप के लिए बहुत जरूरी हो जाता है. तो first of all, the first important thing from our exam point of view is कि which countries border Israel को border करने वाली कौन सी countries. The first one is Lebanon, the second is Syria, the third is Jordan, the fourth one is Egypt. Okay, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. ठीक है. The second important thing is Israel has had war with almost all of its neighbors. Almost नहीं, all of its neighbors. Egypt, Jordan, Syria and Lebanon. ठीक है. Lebanon में भी लड़ाई इजराइल की है, सीरिया से भी थी, अभी भी है, जॉर्डन से भी थी. Now Jordan और सीरिया के बीच में पीस पैक्ट हो चुका है, but still Jordan has time and again decried Israel for its occupation of West Bank and Gaza Strip as well. Egypt के साथ भी बहुत वॉर है इजराइल का. Now but इजराइल और इजिप्ट के बीच में भी पीस ट्रीटी साइन हो चुकी है. Now Gaza Strip, this area, okay, Gaza Strip, and this is West Bank. Ideally, these are Palestinian territories. Understood? But what has happened is Israel has made various enclaves, ठीक है, ऐसे छोटे-छोटे enclaves, settlements. You can call them settlements. ठीक है? There are 3 points of conflict. ठीक है? The very first is these enclaves of Israel that lie in West Bank area. यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड इट इन सिंपल वेज कि बहुत सारी कॉलोनीज बसा दी हैं इजराइल ने वेस्ट बैंक के एरिया में. वेस्ट बैंक बिलोंग्स टू पैलेस्टाइन. वेस्ट बैंक इज बेसिकली पैलेस्टीन. ओके. द सेकेंड पॉइंट ऑफ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज स्टेटस ऑफ यरूशलेम. Jerusalem is an open city. You can see it is not, although and not an open city, it is under the control of Israel right now. ठीक है. But status of Israel पे conflict क्यों है? The first thing is कि status of Jerusalem पे conflict क्यों है? The first thing is Jerusalem is a city that is holy to the three Abrahamic religions. The three religions that have been fighting over it. That are, the first one is Islam, the second one is Judaism, okay, basically Jews, and the third one is of course Christianity. ठीक है. मतलब यरूशलेम में first of all Christ was born here. The second of all for Jews also it is important because Jews का जो founding हुआ था वो यरूशलेम से हुआ था. The first temple and the second temple that are mentioned in the Old Testament. Old Testament is a book, okay, that was later revised to make the New Testament, and that is the basis of Christianity. ठीक है. The Old Testament, why we called all these three Abrahamic religions? Because Abraham was the patriarch of the three religions. ठीक है. I'll try to explain this in a bit detail, but right now we are dealing with the points of conflict and the geography of the region. ठीक है. Now you can see below, this is Gulf of Aqaba, and Israel has a share in Gulf of Aqaba, a very small area that Israel shares with the Gulf of Aqaba. ठीक है. तो Gulf of Aqaba में कौन कौन है? इजिप्ट है, इजराइल है, जॉर्डन. ठीक है. You can see. The second important thing is okay, the first was the enclaves or the colonies of Israel in the West Bank. The second one is the status of Jerusalem, and the third very important point is the right of refugees to return to their own homeland. Why? Israel is basically what? Is a Jewish nation. Israel is a Jewish nation. Okay? India is a secular nation. Similarly, Israel is a Jewish nation. But this all was not Israel prior to 1948. Israel was founded in 1948 after the War of Independence, as Israelis call it, or after the Al-Nakba, as Arabians or Palestinians call it. Okay, there was a war in 1948 between the 5 Arab League countries and Israel. Okay? Israel won that war and declared itself independent. The president of Israel, the prime minister, of Israel at that time was David Ben Gurion. He declared independence and formation of a Israeli or a Jewish nation named by Israel. Okay. At that time what happened was, all the refugees fled. Okay. This was all Palestine. Okay. There were several Israeli enclaves at that time. Okay. There were several parts which were dominated by Israelis. Okay. But it was a Palestinian land. But what happened was, after the war of 1948, Israeli army won and declared independence. At the same time, Israel was given recognition by United States, UK, France, all these countries. But what happened to Palestinians was, they had to fled, and they fled to Gaza Strip, this area. Okay, this area was actually owned by Egypt. Okay. And this whole area prior to 1948 was governed by British. It was under a British mandate. We'll be dealing with it. But it was what happened after 1948. All these refugees fled. Some to West Bank, this area. Some to Lebanon, Syria, this Jordan and Egypt as well. मतलब इस पूरे एरिया से Arabs, जो Muslim minor जो population थी, they had to fled to the neighboring countries, to Europe as well, to USA as well. Now the third point of contention for the peace process that is going on is the right of refugees to return back to their homeland. ठीक है, मतलब अगर कोई रिफ्यूजी जॉर्डन में चला गया जो कि यहाँ पे रहता था, तो he should have the right of return to this place. ठीक है, there is a UN resolution that accepts the right of return for the war refugees. ठीक है, but the point here is Israel refuses to acknowledge that right because even USA has supported Israel in that matter, because Israel thinks that Israel is a Jewish nation. ठीक है, and when these refugees return back to their homeland from where they have been displaced, the Jews will be reduced to minority in the Israel, and the very nature of the country will get changed. Okay, that means Israel में जो Jews हैं they will be get reduced to minority. इस वजह से Israel accept नहीं करता है right of return for refugees. Okay, मतलब हमारे पास 3 point of conflicts हैं. The first one is the Israeli enclaves in the Palestinian territory, in मतलब वेस्ट बैंक में जो इसराइल ने अपनी कॉलोनीज बना ली है. The second one is status of Jerusalem. ठीक है, मतलब यरूशलेम को क्लेम करना चाहता है इसराइल, बट मुस्लिम्स के लिए और क्रिश्चियंस के लिए एज वेल, मतलब क्रिश्चियंस बहुत ज्यादा कन्फ्लिक्ट में नहीं है. क्यों? क्योंकि क्रिश्चियंस आर इजीली allowed access to Jerusalem from the Israeli side. ठीक है, for their own pilgrimage. But Jerusalem is also having what? The third most holiest site for Islam, that is Al-Aqsa Mosque. ठीक है, तो अब उसके स्टेटस को लेके, यरूशलेम के स्टेटस को लेके पैलेस्टीनियंस और अरब्स और मुस्लिम वर्ल्ड में ये है कि इट शुड बी इजीली एक्सेसिबल टू मुस्लिम्स. ठीक है, दैट इज द ईस्टर्न पार्ट ऑफ Jerusalem should be given to West Bank, and the western part of Jerusalem should be given to Israel, where the first temple and the second temple are situated. Okay, so these are the 3 points of contention. We are going to frame our whole lecture around these 3 points. ठीक है, now we get back to the origins कि how this all started. ठीक है, हर चीज की एक कहानी है, तो वो कहानी जाननी जरूरी है कि ये कैसे सब शुरू होता है. ठीक है, is Abraham. ठीक है, Abraham was the patriarch of all the Abrahamic religions. Like the 3 Abrahamic religions are Judaism, Christianity and Islam. He was the patriarch in the sense that all these religions kind of originated from Abraham. Now there is a book called Old Testament and New Testament. New Testament is Bible. ठीक है, न्यू टेस्टामेंट वाज रिवाइज्ड वर्जन ऑफ ओल्ड टेस्टामेंट. ठीक है, तो एंड इट इज बेसिकली बाइबल. तो ओल्ड टेस्टामेंट में इब्राहिम सेड टू हिज सन, ठीक है, दैट यू शुड गो टू एन एरिया दैट इज कनान. ठीक है, दैट इज कनान, द एरिया इन द ब्लू. दिस इज इजिप्ट एज वी सॉ. दिस एरिया वाज रिकमेंडेड बाय इब्राहिम टू हिज सन ईसिया, है ना, and you should go and form a kingdom there. This is called Israelite kingdom. ठीक है, Israelite kingdom that was asked by Abraham to settle. ठीक है, now it was the first thing. Okay, first came सबसे पहले जुडाइज्म मतलब जूज, उसके बाद आते हैं क्रिश्चियंस एंड देन इस्लाम्स. ठीक है, तो फर्स्ट इट वाज सेटल्ड बाय इजराइलीज और व्हाट ज्यूज. ठीक है, एंड दैट इज द ओरिजिन ऑफ जूइज्म. उसके बाद क्या होता है? नाउ these 2 gentlemen here you can see, the first one is King David and the second one is King Solomon. King David was the first king and King Solomon was the second one. King Solomon was the son of David. Now this beautiful piece of temple, it was made by King Solomon, the son of King David. ठीक है, he was not the first king. Actually King Saul established the Jewish kingdom. ठीक है, sorry, see, King Saul established Israel. The Canaan land that I showed into the slide, है ना, that was established by King Saul. Now that was actually a Jewish kingdom. ठीक है, that was established by the sons of Abraham, and subsequently the first Jewish kingdom, ठीक है, the first Jewish kingdom as a political entity was established by King Saul. King David was the second king. King Solomon was the son of King David, ठीक है, and he built the first temple of Jerusalem, ठीक है, he built the first temple of Jerusalem. Sorry, this was the first temple of Jerusalem. It was although it was destroyed by, ठीक है, it was you can see the remnants. This wall, okay, this wall is the remnant of the second temple. The second temple was at the exact same place where the first temple was present, ठीक है. Wait, sorry, ठीक है, you can see this wall, you can see a very uncanny similarity between this wall and that one, ठीक है, and that wall is of very high significance to Jews. Jews worship in this wall, ठीक है, and this one is Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is Al-Aqsa Mosque, sorry, Al-Aqsa, okay. Al-Aqsa Mosque is the holiest, the third holiest place of Muslims, because the whole area is called Temple Mount. It's called Temple Mount, and Temple Mount is important for both the three religions. The first one is Judaism. Judaism का तो इसलिए important है क्योंकि temple ही यहाँ पे था, and that is why it is called Temple Mount. The second one is for Christians क्यों important है? क्योंकि Jesus was born in Jerusalem and he preached a lot of the gospels in this temple. Okay, the gospels or the Bible that Jesus preached was at this temple, and that is why Christians associate themselves with this temple also. The third one is Al-Aqsa Mosque. Islam, the belief in Islam is that Prophet Muhammad took the journey to the throne of God from this place, and that is why there needs to be a mosque for the commemoration of that event. And that is why after Mecca and Medina, this place is of very high reverence to Muslims all across the world. And you can see why there is a conflict. Okay, you can see why there is a conflict, because they are on the exact same position. Okay, and what happened was the first temple that we saw in the last slide was destroyed in 66 BC by the king of Babylon. The second temple was again built by the king, the great king Herod. Okay? Herod built in 37 BC. Okay, but Israeli kingdom was actually ruled by many dynasties and many people. Okay? So its nature kind of changed throughout the period of time. It was subsequently ruled by Romans, Crusaders, you know, Pope. On the orders of the Pope, the kings of Europe came to this area, Middle East, and they destroyed everything. Mamluks, Seljuks, Greeks, Assyrians, and Ottomans. Last were the Ottomans. Okay? Ottoman Empire was destroyed in the First World War. After the First World War, Ottoman Empire was destroyed. And we all know what happened was Mustafa Kemal Pasha became the Prime Minister of Turkey. Okay, and he made the modern Turkey or the secular Turkey as we know today. But Ottoman Empire was very big. Okay? And Ottoman Empire was very big in the sense that Ottoman Empire had control over all the holy sites of Islam and also Jerusalem. Okay? So Mecca, Medina were all under the supervision of Ottoman Turks. Okay? Even Jerusalem was under the supervision of Ottoman Turks. And Ottoman Turks allowed the Jews to flourish in that area. Okay? But Jews were always, like in Ottoman Empire, Jews were always in minority in that whole Palestinian territory that is now disputed. Okay? Lekin, now what happened was most of the Jews went to Europe. Okay? During the Ottoman Empire, what happened was due to Muslim persecution of Jews and all, they went to what? Europe as we know today. Okay? Because all these areas were connected at that time. And they formed a diaspora there. Diaspora की वजह से क्या हुआ? कि बहुत सारे Jews यूरोप में हैं, and when you read the medieval literature like the Merchant of Venice of William Shakespeare, you will understand that Jews faced persecution throughout the period of history. ठीक है, there has been a consistent conflict going on between the Jews, Muslims and Christians. ठीक है, तो when they faced persecution in Europe, and also there was a rise of Zionist movement. Zionist movement is a movement that seeks to establish a Jewish kingdom of Israel. Okay, and Zionists are those people who want to establish, of course, a Jewish kingdom on the basis of Old Testament. ठीक है, जो एरिया कैनान वाला एरिया था वहां पे वो अपना Jewish kingdom establish करना चाहते हैं, जैसे उन लोगों को Zionist कहा जाता है. And in that list of Zionists, there was one great personality who was Rothschild. ठीक है, Rothschild Corporation was the biggest bank of Europe at that time of the point. And Mr. Rothschild was the greatest Zionist. Okay, and he actually funded the reverse migration of Jews from Europe and other parts of the world to the current Israel. ठीक है, अब ये जो reverse migration है उसको फर्स्ट आलिया कहा जाता है. ठीक है, आलिया happened from 1880 to 1903. From 1880 onwards, what happened was reverse migration took place. But these Jews people who were living in Europe, that was completely different kind of climate. When they came back to Palestine, it was a desert. Yes, they could not flourish. Okay. All they could do was most of them perished. Most of them returned back to their countries of origin. The rest got assimilated into the Palestinian culture, and there was not kind of like social cohesion was okay. ठीक है. Towards the beginning of the 20th century, but there were 2.5 million Jews migrated to Ottoman Palestine. ठीक है. The Palestine that we know today, the Israel that we know today, whole area was Ottoman Palestine area. ठीक है. And by the end of the First World War, ठीक है, these 2.5 million Jews migrated, but most of them perished or returned back. By the end of the First World War, ठीक है, sorry, by the starting of the First World War, there were around 75,000 Jews in whole of the Palestinian Empire. Whole of the Ottoman Palestine, that the area of Israel and Palestine now as we know today. ठीक है. This is a picture from the first Aliyah, people landing on the beaches of what? Israel. ठीक है. Haifa city के around. ठीक है. Now what happened was, during the First World War, Britain wanted to, Jews were a very powerful entity in whole of the France and Europe and also USA as well. ठीक है. So what happened was, British Foreign Secretary Mr. Arthur James Balfour, he made a declaration to Lionel Walter Rothschild. As I said, this gentleman, Lionel Walter Rothschild, was the biggest banker of Europe at that time, and he personally funded $50 million at that time. He put his own wealth to the tune of $50 million for the promotion of reverse migration from Europe to Palestine. ठीक है. And to rally the USA's opinion, the USA government behind Allied powers, what British did was, British government basically, the Foreign Secretary of Britain, Foreign Secretary matlab Foreign Minister basically, he issued a declaration that is called Balfour Declaration on his name, and that was written to Lionel Walter Rothschild, that Britain would promise what? A national home for Jewish people in the state of Palestine. ठीक है. To rally the Jewish opinion of USA to support the cause of Allied nations. ठीक है. Now this is a pictographic representation how Jewish migration, Jaffa, Haifa, and all these places, ठीक है, migration took place from Europe to what? The current that Ottoman Palestine. ठीक है, that was Jerusalem. The green portion represents the population that was dominated by Palestinian Arabs. The blue portion represents the population that was dominated by Jewish immigration. ठीक है. Okay. In all the subsequent diagrams or the figures, you will observe how the demography of the area changed. Okay. Under the British mandate, now what happened was, after the World War I, okay, League of Nations was formed, and League of Nations supported the idea of Balfour Declaration in 1922. Okay, and that means the migration from Europe increased drastically to the Palestinian area, and this migration was further increased a lot by the Hitler's onslaught on Jews. ठीक है, 1930s के बाद का जो 1939 एंड पूरा इस टाइम के जो हिटलर का ऑनस्लॉट था जूस पे, उसकी वजह से जूस faced a lot of persecution in whole of Europe, and due to which they fled back to the Palestinian Ottoman Palestine. ठीक है, but now what happened was, in 1939 a white paper was released by the government of Britain, ठीक है, and it said that they will restrict the entry of Jews from Europe to Palestine, ठीक है, but it never actually came into being. After the World War II, what happened was, there was what happened actually after the World War I, Palestine became the mandate of Britain. Mandate मतलब the power to govern, ठीक है, मतलब Britain got the power. Britain and France divided most of the colonies after World War I. Okay, so what happened was, after World War I, Britain got the mandate of Palestine. मतलब this whole area basically was under the British control, because the Ottomans have now perished. Okay, the Turkey was a very small area now, and this was called Transjordan at that time, and Saudi Arabia in the sides of Transjordan. ठीक है, तो after Second World War, okay, again United Nations was formed, United Nations, and the 1947 a resolution by the number of 181 was drafted, and this area in the dark color, it was given to Israel. In this light color, it was given to Palestine, and Jerusalem was declared an open city under the control of United Nations. Okay, what happened was, this was the partition plan that was planned by United Nations after the World War II. Okay, इसलिए क्योंकि by after the end of World War I and by the end of World War II, the demography of this area has changed substantially, and the constant civil war was going on between Jews, Palestinians, and British forces as well. So, up to find out the permanent solution, one important thing is there is a city called Haifa. ठीक है, Indian forces, ठीक है, Indian forces at that time, British Indian forces basically, there was the whole troop consisted of Indian nationals. They freed the city of Haifa, ठीक है, they freed the city of Haifa from, of course, the क्या कहते हैं उसे, German control, ठीक है, and that is why ये important है city of Haifa, ठीक है. तो but okay, this plan was accepted by Israel, ठीक है. The Israel's representative was David Ben Gurion. He accepted this proposal, but Palestinians refused on the grounds that any acceptance of a proposal of a Jewish nation will lead to the end of Palestinian or Arab population, or it will be an acknowledgement of existence of a Israeli nation, yeah, Jewish nation, and that will be detrimental to the Palestinian interests or Muslim interests. ठीक है, so this plan was shunned by all the Arab leaders also and the Palestinians as well. What happened was, in 1948, however, ठीक है, in 1948, Israel declared itself. In 1948, a war took place between Israeli forces under the David Ben Gurion's leadership and of course the Arab League. ठीक है, 5 countries of the Arab League, namely Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. ठीक है, they formed a coalition and they attacked Israel, but Israel won the war. and Israelis term it the War of Independence. However, Arabs term it the Al-Nakba or the catastrophe. Okay. And after the end of the war, what happened was Israeli nation was formed and David Ben-Gurion declared Israel independent, and that is how Israel was formed in 1948. But this led to huge outflux of migrants, as I told you in the very starting. You can see huge outflux of migrants took place around all these countries and in West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip was controlled by Egypt. West Bank was controlled by Jordan. ठीक है. Now what happened was ठीक है. उसके बाद there have been a series of conflicts. ठीक है. Series of conflict 1956 में. अगला conflict जो main reason था जो conflict का, this is Egypt. Okay, this is called Sinai Peninsula. This is also very important from prelims point of view. The Sinai Peninsula is bounded on three sides: Gulf of Suez, Gulf of Aqaba, and the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so this is also very important. What happened was, in 1956, when Gamal Abdel Nasser became the Prime Minister of Egypt, he declared the Gulf, he nationalized the Gulf of Suez. ठीक है, उसने सुएज का nationalization कर दिया, and also limited the access of Israel. Israel के लिए यहाँ से access था Gulf of Aqaba के through होते हुए Strait of Tiran. This is called Strait of Tiran. Again, it's very important. Strait of Tiran. Okay. Now, what Egypt did was it limited the access of Israeli traders to the Suez Canal, and subsequently the link to Europe. Due to which, what Israel did was Israel attacked Egypt, and when as soon as Israel attacked Egypt, the other nations, in 1967 what happened? Jordan, Egypt and Syria attacked what? Israel. इन्हीं tensions की वजह से these tensions got over and over and over, and that turned into a full-fledged war. In 1967, there was a 6-day war. 6-day war actually हुआ कैसे? Israel ने बहुत सारा rocket दागा Egypt पे, and Israel virtually destroyed Egypt's air force. Then it was a very easy point. The war was actually won. ठीक है, तो air superiority Israel ने पहले achieve कर ली, and then Israel occupied Golan Heights from Syria. We saw in the very starting Golan Heights from Syria, Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, West Bank from Jordan, West Bank from Jordan, and Gaza Strip from Egypt. Egypt और Jordan का heavy loss हुआ, ठीक है. Syria का Golan Heights ले लिया. So these 4 got occupied by Israel. Okay. Now देखते हैं कहानी आगे क्या चलती है. फिर 1973 War of Yom Kippur. Now after the war of 1967, Israeli forces were overconfident and they were not expecting any kind of war. Yom Kippur is an Israeli or Jewish holiday. On that day, Egypt launched a very targeted airstrike. ठीक है, जिसकी वजह से Israel, actually what happened was Israeli air force और Israeli assets बहुत सारे destroy हो गए, but at the end a peace treaty was signed. 1973 के बाद 1973 के बाद 5 years तक negotiation चलता रहा, ठीक है, and Jimmy Carter became the Prime President of USA in 1976, I guess, ठीक है. After that, Camp David Accords were signed between Egypt, Israel, and of course Jimmy Carter, the USA. Camp David is actually a place of a resort for the President of USA in a military establishment of USA. So the President of USA invited both the Prime Ministers of Israel and क्या कहते हैं इनको? Egypt, ठीक है, and they went there and a series of negotiations took place, and then the Camp David Accords, that are very important. The Camp David Accords were signed. According to the Camp David Accords, the first thing Egypt was going to do was to recognize Israel as a country. ठीक है, none of the Arab countries recognized Israel. आज भी पाकिस्तान and many other countries do not recognize Israel as a state or a country. The second thing Israel was to do was to withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula. This whole Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, was given back to Egypt. And the third was Egypt will let Israel use the Suez Canal. The tensions generated due to the limiting of access to Suez Canal by Egypt to Israel. ठीक है, तो ये important points थे. फिर 1982 में Israel invaded Lebanon. ठीक है, because यहाँ पे separatist movements generate हो रहे थे. Separatist क्या है? Revolutionary movements under the regime of PLO. ठीक है, Palestinian Liberation Organization. ठीक है, तो इजराइल की आर्मी ने इन्वेड कर दिया लेबनान को. एंड स्टिल द कंडीशन ऑफ लेबनान इज वेरी कन्फ्लिक्टिंग. वी लास्ट ईयर वी हर्ड अ वेरी सैड ब्लास्ट इन द कैपिटल सिटी ऑफ बेरूत. ठीक है, तो लेबनान को इन्वेड कर दिया इजराइल ने 1982 में टू ओवरथ्रो पीएलओ. पीएलओ वाज एक्चुअली पैलेस्टीनियन लिबरेशन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, वाज अ armed group. ठीक है, it was an armed group. It was launching attacks on Israel from Lebanon. ठीक है, फिर 1987 में होता है फर्स्ट इंतिफादा. इंतिफादा इज बेसिकली मीनिंग द शेकिंग. इट्स एन अरेबिक वर्ड. ठीक है, द शेकिंग. ठीक है, 1987 में फर्स्ट इंतिफादा. उसके बाद इट टुक लाइक फर्स्ट इंतिफादा मीन्स देयर वाज आउटबर्स्ट ऑफ वायलेंस एंड देयर वाज ऑल दिस काइंड ऑफ. ठीक है, तो ऑस्लो पीस अकॉर्ड्स वर साइंड इन 1993. ऑस्लो इज द कैपिटल सिटी ऑफ नॉर्वे. ठीक है, 1997 ऑस्लो पीस अकॉर्ड्स के अकॉर्डिंग क्या हुआ? इजराइल विथड्रू फ्रॉम द पार्ट्स ऑफ वेस्ट बैंक बिकॉज आफ्टर द कैंप डेविड अकॉर्ड्स Egypt was given back the Sinai Peninsula, but Gaza Strip and West Bank were still annexed by Israel. तो फिर 1993 में Oslo Peace Accords were signed. Oslo Peace Accords के according the West Bank, the parts of West Bank will be given to some kind of authority that will govern Palestine. ठीक है, तो that will be acceptance of what? Palestinian sovereignty. Okay, and but Gaza Strip was completely controlled by Israel. ठीक है, but West Bank में some parts of West Bank were given back to Palestinian, some kind of Palestinian authority, मतलब administrative authority that will govern Israel, Palestine. फिर 2000 में फिर दोबारा वायलेंस का आउटब्रेक हो जाता है, बहुत सीवियर. ठीक है, 2000 to 2005 तक ये चलता है. सेकेंड इंतिफादा इसको कहते हैं. आफ्टर द एंड ऑफ सेकेंड इंतिफादा, Israel announced that it will withdraw from Gaza Strip, and the Gaza Strip will be given to some kind of authority that is governing Palestine or West Bank of the Palestine. ठीक है, तो 2005, but of course it withdrew from its troops from Gaza, but Gaza Strip में बहुत ज़्यादा, Gaza Strip is called the open prison of the world because Israel has imposed severe blockades across Gaza Strip. ठीक है, तो 2006 में second Lebanon war, Israel versus Hezbollah. 2006 Israel versus Hamas. Hamas has been declared terrorist organization by almost all of the countries. ठीक है, now 2017 में United States formally recognized the peace process has already conflicting positions of all the countries. In the mid of all, United States formally recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The capital of Israel is actually Tel Aviv. India does not recognize Jerusalem as capital of Israel. ठीक है, but and shifted its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The status of Jerusalem has already been disputed. ठीक है, and when Mr. Trump moved his capital and embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it has complicated further the already complex process. ठीक है, and in the end, Trump also released Trump's Middle East peace plan. ठीक है, the refugees of 1948 war. ठीक है, the 1948 war means Al-Aqsa. ठीक है, or the catastrophe, the war that led to independence of Israel, have the right to return to historic Palestine. Sorry, Trump said that, or the peace plan says that the 1948 war refugees do not have the right to return back to their homeland. Of course, that will change the demography of Israel as a Jewish nation. the refugees can return to a future Palestine. Future Palestine means, of course, West Bank and Gaza Strip. Jerusalem would be the capital for Israel, ठीक है? But parts of East Jerusalem will be given to Palestine, ठीक है? Al-Quds will be the capital of Palestine with the parts of East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is holier site for Islam, ठीक है? Israel could annex the part of West Bank, and this is very controversial in the sense it acknowledges the right of Israel to annex the West Bank, parts of West Bank. That means it tries to legitimize the colonies that Israel has built in West Bank. ठीक है? In the and even Jordan Valley. Jordan is the river. ठीक है? Daughter 50 billion investment to make Palestinian Authority strong. ठीक है? So these are the Trump's peace plan. Trump's proposal for Palestinian state are. This is the current status. This is Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is mostly governed by Israel. This is Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Upper Lebanon, Mediterranean Sea. The Trump's peace plan says that these points will, this area, okay, and this area will be Palestinian, okay, and they will be connected through tunnels. Sorry. They will be connected through tunnels, okay, and these areas in orange, that will be Palestinian area, and you can see there enclaves of Israel in Palestine. Palestine and all Arab countries, of course, rejected it. Okay, so I hope you understood this peace process and how complex and complicated this is, है ना? So there are some solutions that the people have suggested, that is two-state solution, that is one gives to Israel and one given to Palestine. ठीक है? The other is one-state solution. One-state solution में the whole will be declared one Israel-Palestine, ठीक है? And all the residents of Israel-Palestine will be having same rights, ठीक है? But there has no peace been achieved till now.